Hello there and good afternoon. Welcome once again to our question and answer session with Professor Michael Clarke. Professor Clarke, good afternoon to you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been together in this room. I'm pleased to be back. As you can see from the screen behind us, the focus today will be on Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Ukraine's defence of its sovereign territory. With a focus, because lots of your questions have come in about this, about what the Russians have had to say in the past few days in response to that reporting that British-made drones were being used for some of these deep strikes into Ukraine. Let's just get straight into it, because that's where the questions begin. And I know that's what was on many people's mind. Before you guys joined us, I was mining Michael for some information about it as well. So let's get started. Andy James has the first question that asks, how serious is Russia's threat to the UK over British drones, and how far could Putin go without risking conflict with NATO? Let's just be clear what the Russians said. They said there will be consequences. For what
they said that this is you're complicit with the attack of the Ukrainians, the Nazi regime, they say in Kiev. That's the code name for Ukraine's government, and that you're complicit with this. And as the attack develops, so we have to hold you responsible for what's happening, and there will be consequences. It's actually a more mooted response than they might have. It was absolutely predictable. And they've known this for some time. It's not as if the story that appeared in last week's Sunday Times has made it into an issue in Britain, because that's the first time it's been said publicly. But the Russians have known this for some time, and we've known it for some time. You know, we, the British official government, have known it for some time that this is happening. So it's not as if they're shocked by it, and they needed to make some response. And so the response is the same as it was when we gave Storm Shadow to Ukraine. Storm Shadow, our cruise missile, some hundreds of those, which were used in Kursk, in the Kursk operation, and against other targets inside Russia. It's the same response before that they offered when we offered Challenger 2 tanks to the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, or that's where they were put. And whenever we've given something to Ukraine that is significant in battlefield terms, at least, if not in numbers, they've made this sort of response. So that's not surprising. It's not terribly frightening to most of us.
Right. So just let's be
what
clear.
Could they do?
Not that frightening.
No, well, not to me, certainly. And I don't think to the British policy establishment. They say, well, you take account of all these statements. But they build up. I mean, there is a sort of accumulative sense of animus against Britain in particular. I mean, Britain is in the crosshairs as far as Russia is concerned. And although the Russians are a bit careful what they do, they always threaten to do a lot more than they do as far as the Western allies are concerned. But that animus is building up. And the Russians, if they could find a vulnerability of ours and really exploit it, they'd do that if they could, because if they could make an example of Britain and show the other European allies that there are consequences to supporting Ukraine, they'd love to do it in our case, because they think it would be influential in other countries in Europe. It would give them a lot of satisfaction to really do something to Britain that is hurtful in some way, like cyber attack, bringing down a lot of our communication systems or something. I mean, the Jaguar Land Rover hack, that caused a lot of economic damage. Imagine that, but sort of tenfold. That would be a serious consequence. And if the Russians felt they could do that, they are getting closer to trying that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, that takes us on to the next question then, from Tagger Tim, T-A-G-A Tim, who asks, what could the Russians do to the UK outside of direct military action? You mentioned the sort of cyber attacks. Also, as well, the allegations that Russian groups were behind some of those warehouses that were set on fire in and around London, other sort of, what would you call it, grey zone, just a sort of attacks that are kind of being carried out by people on behalf of the Russian states.
Well, I think it's four things. I mean, we think about this a lot, and I read a lot of it, and I write some of it myself. There's four sorts of things I think the Russians could do, sub-threshold in particular, in Britain's case. So one is cyber war of various sorts. Second is sabotage, and we've seen a bit of that. Assassination is a third one, where they assassinate their opponents or put their opponents under fear. And that's been happening elsewhere in Europe.
Yes.
The boss of Saab in Sweden looked as if there was a credible plot against him. The Swedes are still looking at it.
But this is two Russian tourists apparently who were nearby with walkie-talkies.
But nothing seems to have come of it so far, as of this morning. But the CEOs of some of the big companies all now have to have security. So a third thing is the possibility threat of assassination. And then the fourth thing is social disorder, or using social media to create domestic disorder. Anything that they can do to increase that sense of anxiety in the population, of political discord, to work on any, we've got lots of fault lines in our politics, all political systems have, and they work on any fault lines they could find, with the Reform Party, over immigration, over small boats, over devolution, over, Welsh and Scottish demands for independence. Anything they can find, which is a potential fissure in Britain's social cohesion, they go for it. And there's more of that. It's been building up in general. It could build up a lot more.
How much proof do we have of previous interactions by the Russians, interventions by the Russians in that kind of space? I remember around the Scottish campaign, and also just recently with the migration crisis as well. There are reports that what's happening around Quetta was being amplified by people within Russia from the Russian front to try and make.
I mean, what they do, they don't create these issues. These issues exist, so we shouldn't pretend that the Russians have created the Reform Party or anything like that, or the immigration crisis. They take something that exists and they find ways of making it worse, or polarizing it, or making people feel even more strongly about it by distorting the facts. They take basic facts and then they distort them, and they add a few more things to them, and they invent a few quotes, and people who have been a bit critical are made to seem extremely critical by the manipulation of their words. It's happened to me. I've had things that I've said on Sky been taken and added to by things I didn't say to make it look as if I said this, or this when I didn't at all. So they take something that's real, and then they make it into something that makes other people angry. So that's that, and they're very good at it.
They're masters at it, right? This is something that they have been doing for a long time, even before the invention of social media. Manipulate with propaganda.
It goes back to the old communist system of subverting the West, as we tried to. We in the 1920s tried to subvert the Bolshevik Revolution. We didn't try terribly hard, I have to say, but the Soviet Russia then conducted a long campaign, particularly during the Cold War after 1946-47, of subversion against Western democracies. And the methods were so hopeless that they were laughable, and they almost all failed. A little bit of success in Italy with the Euro-communist parties of Italy for a little while in the 1970s, but it didn't amount to much. And most of it was either it was just leave it alone because it was so silly. It only affected, the useful idiots and fellow travellers who would think that anyway. Yeah. But the difference now is that technology and the sophistication of the techniques of persuasion are so advanced that what used to be a peripheral irritation is now a genuine societal threat.
Without spending too much more time on it, but how much of it now is about finding those fault lines and exploiting them? Because I guess previously, before the 70s, before it all was a bit crap by the Soviets, there was this option of another way of society being organised. That they were very offering, and as you say, fellow travellers, but also people that were just kind of interested in that way of thinking in Marxism. How much do the Russians kind of offer this different way? They're very, very conservative. They've got a very sort of focus on anti-LGBT as well. Do they kind of offer that as well?
They do in a sense, yeah. I mean, they don't offer the sort of model that the communist world offered to say this is an alternative view of society. And a third of the world in the 1960s and 70s lived under systems that cleaved towards that there was an alternative way, which ran out of steam in its own everywhere, more or less together. They don't offer that anymore, but they do offer a sort of cultural alternative, which is to say the degeneracy of the West it can be countered by our sort of true Christian values. We are the Orthodox Church, is the Christian values, and we offer the traditional societal alternative. Now, when you look at it, it doesn't stand up to a moment's scrutiny as to the way it's actually operated in Russia, but that's the way it is presented. So the Patriarch Kirill, for instance, the Grand Patriarch of Moscow, a very good friend of Putin, you look at the things that he says, and they kind of make sense until you look at Kirill and you look at the way the church behaves. And then they look downright ridiculous. So there is an alternative there, but it doesn't stand much scrutiny.
Question here from Mark in Leeds about how well prepared Britain would be if this sub-threshold, this grey zone hybrid war increases.
Yeah, well, the answer is patchy, I think. I mean, it's not as bad as it may sound. I mean, something that I'm involved in is the National Resilience Assessment, National Security and Resilience Assessment, which the government does internally all the time. And I'm involved in an external, one of the panels where we externally look at it. And, we don't talk about what it is we look at, and that's all restricted material. But the idea is that every department in government has to produce a reasonable worst-case scenario. So Department of Transport, the Department of Home Office, the Foreign Office, Department of Energy, net zero, they all have to produce a reasonable worst-case scenario. Not the absolute worst case, which would be the Martians landing or whatever. Reasonable worst case, which is testing that we might come up with. And
so this is system failure, a massive hack, something that falls
something like that,
transport system.
And what they do, and we don't comment on the panel that I'm involved in. We don't comment on what you should do about it. We say, is this a reasonable worst case? Okay. And so we have these meetings reasonably regularly. Yeah. And we say, okay, is that a reasonable version of what it could be? And when you look at what they do, these departments, they come in front of us and they present their reasonable worst case outlines. And they've done a lot of really detailed work. So I say, without going into any specifics, I mean, they might take a city and they say, okay, we've selected this particular city in the United Kingdom. If all of this happened at once to the transport system, that's a reasonable worst case. And they've done really detailed work on what would happen in that city if these things happened. And then they say, so if we scale that up across 10 cities, that's how bad it might be. And our job is to say, is that a reasonable worst case? And I have to say, I mean, since I've been involved in this for the last couple of years, I'm quite impressed by the degree of detail that these scenarios go into. I mean, some are better than others. But there is a lot of work.
Do we have
it's not complacent? That's the point.
Do we have a response to some of these things? Are we able to manage?
There's a response to all of them. Right. Now, whether the response is good enough is a separate question, and that's not my concern. My concern is the detail of the reasonable worst case sensible. But I'm impressed by the work, the background work that goes into it. They're not complacent. They're not just sitting there saying, "Oh well, we'll cope in some way." There isn't a muddle through attitude. There is an attitude that this is what it might be. This is what we would do about it.
And this is a regular thing. So it's not it
goes on all the time. Yeah, it's not once every 5 years. No, it's constant. It goes on all the time. And every year, the assessment, every department has to make a new assessment on an annual basis. So it's running all the time. Now, the demands are going up all the time. And the responses are likely to be patchy. And the big thing that people have got to understand is that government only controls some of the main areas. So if we're talking about government, communications, defence, then the government has got pretty good control over that. Health service got quite a lot of control. But food distribution, well, it has no control over that. That's all the retailers. Energy doesn't have a lot of control over energy. Water supply doesn't have a lot of control over that. So the government can influence other areas. Yeah. But it doesn't have a grip on them because they're in the private sector. And the answer to our resilience question is we're pretty resilient in most of the areas the government has a direct control over. And I ask this question constantly of ministers and officials, and the answer I get is we're patchy elsewhere.
Interesting.
Some good, some bad. The city's pretty good. The financial city's pretty good.
Services, insurance, I guess.
Very good. Yeah.
But large retailers, that sort of thing, are they...
Varies. I mean, Jaguar Land Rover, they shouldn't have got in there. Health service, everybody worries about because I think the systems being used in the health service are so out of date.
I was going to say, there's probably about 5 or 6 different ones all over the country as well. That
I mean, the health service is awfully vulnerable, and everybody worries about that. I mean, I'm not saying anything that isn't obvious in public, so everybody worries about that. So we've got some strong areas and some, that are genuinely worrisome.
Are there any examples, I'm thinking in European states, where the Russians have done something? One that keeps coming to my mind is, I don't know if you remember a little while ago, the traffic light system in Madrid went completely offline, sort of in a very strange way for like hours and hours and hours, and there was gridlock. And I mean, my conspiracy, the first thing I said, it's got to be the Russians. I don't know if it was the Russians, maybe just a power failure. But is there anything that they have done in recent weeks, months, years that we can attribute to them? Is this sort of thing?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that has just come to light recently. Last December in Poland, there was an attempt to bring down almost the whole of the power system, right, by cyber attacking it. Now, what we know about, and the reason this is significant, is that it has now been established. I mean, it was believed to be the Russians from the very beginning. It's now become clear, authoritatively, that yes, it was the Russians, and it was the FSB not the GRU. The GRU are military intelligence. FSB are like the MI6, foreign intelligence. Now, normally, when FSB penetrates something, they penetrate just to sit there, right? They penetrate a system and just listen, stay there, just get inside the system and just listen and watch. In this case, FSB tried to destroy it. They failed, and it was a complete failure. But the fact that the FSB...
Because of the Polish resilience, or just because they're
because of Polish resilience, yeah, and some good external help as well, I have to say, is my understanding. And so it failed. But the attempt to destroy a whole system in Poland by the FSB, who normally are just a listening device. Now, MI6 would never have done that. The MI6, if they get into something, they sit and listen. That's their job, to listen. The fact that FSB was doing this it seems to indicate to other people that this is Russia's appetite for risk is growing. They're doing riskier things, so they're prepared to compromise this great asset they had, getting inside the Polish system, and then they were going to try and, as it were, blow it up in a cyber sense.
Okay, just what would that actually look like? Because we talk about getting inside systems, bringing down the system. What would it look like to streets up and down this country if they did get into our energy grid?
It would be a sort of a rolling failure.
Right.
So things will go down, and if you get single points of failure, so particular electrical systems that control water pumps, so water supply goes down, not because the water has failed, but because the pump has failed, and the pump has failed because the electrical generators
Water's off.
have gone, and the backup generators have been sabotaged in some way. And so you're looking at a sort of cascade of consequences, and every consequence makes other consequences worse. And so for the government, you've got to actually get a block in quite quickly so that you stop the cascade and then get back to whatever the original problem is. And of course, if a malign actor is trying to do real damage, then they'll try to set off 3 or 4 crises simultaneously, so that one crisis reinforces another.
Can't find the place. I think that is a perfect place to do our weekly plug for the thing that you're working on, Michael, Sky's Defence Insider app, which is coming very, very soon. It's Michael and our colleague Deborah Haynes that will offer you that kind of world-class expertise on all sorts of things. Defense.
We'll name names. We'll lift the lid. We'll say awful things.
Making promises. It's going to be available very, very soon. The subscription service is launching pretty soon. Can't tell you when.
8th of September.
Good.
It's my latest, yeah.
He can tell you when. You register your interest. You can scan the QR code that I'm reliably told will be on screen right about now, and or you can click the link in the video description, and you'll have that kind of insight from Michael straight into your Defence Insider app. And it's only going to be for you because it's a subscription service, so you won't be able to find it anywhere else. So I thoroughly
am
recommend.
retiring behind a paywall.
There he goes. I'm going to miss him. So subscribe. Get the Insider as soon as you can, and it launches, as Michael said, on the 8th of September. I've just arranged a meeting for around about then, so it's coming quick. Yeah, it's going to be here soon, and we are very much looking forward to it. That's the plug. Let's move on to some more questions that we've had. Quick fire ones, if we can, Michael. Cash has asked, does the Kremlin's public warning over British drones complicate its hybrid strategy by removing plausible deniability? Or is it implied attribution actually a feature meant to intimidate the UK while playing to Putin's domestic audience?
Yeah, no, I think
there?
I think Cash is kind of right. Putin, remember, they're coming up for parliamentary elections in September.
Oh yes, they've removed all the parties that are against.
That's right.
The war.
Yeah.
None of those can run.
Yabloko.
Yeah.
Yabloko is it is Yabloko. I always used to say Yabloko because I could remember it more easily. Yabloko, but Yabloko. And they were the only plausible, anti-war opposition party. They've been outlawed now, so there is nobody. So the result of those elections is not in doubt at all. But the elections, in all sorts of other ways, may indicate the degree of disquiet among the Russian public about government corruption, the war, and so on. So there is some nervousness in the Kremlin about this, and undoubtedly, Putin's out on a series of visits, always to the east. He's never gone west of Moscow because of security problems, because of Ukrainian drones, and so he goes to the east a lot. But he is going on a series of visits now and tours, which is interesting that he obviously feels he needs to. And a degree of this argument about the drones, about British drones, is partly playing to his public, which is to say, I'm the man who's preventing the Western world attacking us, or the Western world is trying to attack us, and that's what we're fighting for. And that's the narrative that the Ukraine war is really about a NATO plot to dismantle Russia, and Ukraine just happens to be the front line.
And as we kind of discussed from the very beginning of this, with that argument that he put forward on the 20th of February before the invasion began, it starts in some ways, if you are that way minded, to become a self-fulfilling prophecy when there is more input from Western nations, more input from NATO states. He can make that argument more plausibly that
every time we try to help the Ukrainians, that strengthens his argument that this is all about the West attacking Russia. There's no way out of that. We can't help it. I mean, other than to say, well, because we don't want that argument to seem true, we're going to let Ukraine be conquered. It's a dilemma we just have to live with.
Michael Farley has a question, which I'm interested in the answer to as well, Michael. How will we defend our undersea cable network? How vulnerable is it?
Oh, okay. Well, the cable network is pretty extensive because we have electrical cables which link in from Ireland, from Iceland, from the continent, France, Netherlands. We have a big gas cable from Norway. And so we've got a lot of cables around the UK. And they're vulnerable because the cable's on the seabed. And the Russians have been playing about with them. At least they've been hovering over them. They know where they are. We don't think that they've tried to sabotage them actively yet, but they might. So what have we got? We've got a couple of ships. There's HMS Proteus, which is a ship that the Navy brought from P&O, actually. It was an old, not a liner. It was an oil industry ship.
Right.
And the Proteus is now at sea. It's an ocean survey ship. I'm proud of the Proteus because it was redone, it was reworked at Kamali's shipyard in Birkenhead.
Okay, excellent.
Where most of my family used to live. We used to work one way or another. Everybody worked at Kamali's for some time or other. Because shipyards require every skill.
Yep.
Not just riveting and steel making. It's upholstery, carpentry.
Huge local industry that was completely decimated.
Electricians, plumbers, everybody is required when a ship is being built in the old days. Anyway, so the Proteus was reworked at Kamali's, and that's now, I think, a pretty good one. The other one we've got is the what's now HMS Stirling Castle, and that was an RFA, it was a fleet auxiliary ship. And the Stirling Castle is actually now acting as a mothership for drones, undersea drones, doing the same job as the Lyme Bay. Remember we've talked about the Lyme Bay before?
RFA Lyme
so
Bay.
The Stirling Castle has become a Navy ship, HMS. The Lyme Bay is still an RFA ship, Royal Fleet Auxiliary. And the RFA Lyme Bay is, I think, still in the Gulf, acting with counter-mining. So we've got three ships.
Yep.
So we've got the Proteus, which is RFA. We've got HMS Stirling Castle, and we've got RFA Lyme Bay.
Yep.
So three ships which can do different things. They're all, I think, fairly capable, but they're all, at the moment, doing something else. So we do have the capabilities, but we need them, in our own waters. And the other thing I should say, none of these are real warships.
No.
They're useful ships, but they're not warships in the conventional sense. They don't carry armaments unless a couple of 30mm machine guns have been put on a couple of them, but that wouldn't make much difference to anything. But there you are. We do have a capability. And we've got the undersea drones, and there's a lot of surveillance. I mean, although we can't do much about Russian ships hanging around our coastline these days because we don't have enough ships ourselves, they never do it without us knowing exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and they've got form as well. Just having a look here, in the Baltic Sea, they've been severing at least 11 communication cables between Finland, off the coast of Finland and Estonia. So they are at it. Whatever.
They drag their anchors, and they always claim it's an accident. They drag an anchor. I mean, no big ship can drag an anchor and not notice, for heaven's sake. It just can't be done. It's obvious sabotage.
Yeah.
I mean, NATO is getting tougher about this, but as I keep saying, we're getting nearer and nearer to a militarized confrontation as we decide that this is enough. We're not going to put up with this constantly. In the case of UK cables, they're vulnerable, and we need them because as an island nation, we have to have undersea cables, and we're doing quite a lot to protect them, but we'll probably need to do a fair bit more.
Question here from Ads about ballistic missiles. Ad says, Britain does not appear to have a comprehensive ballistic missile defence system. Is anything being done to address that gap, and are defence priorities in the right place? I mean, the last part of that, I guess, do we need a better system to protect from ballistic missiles here?
We do. I mean, we never used to worry too much about that because ballistic missiles were something only for intercontinental use. That was, in the event of a nuclear war, ballistic missiles will be used, and that would be a different ballgame altogether. But in the last 20 years, ballistic missiles have become smaller, and accurate and usable on the battlefield in ways we never used to take all that seriously. And now we do need to take them seriously. So we need them on our to protect our own forces on a battlefield, but increasingly to protect our homeland. The threat to the homeland is not mass groups of bombers coming over to bomb the homeland, as in Second World War. That felt like the case until the 1970s, 80s. But now the problem is ballistic missiles. So yeah, we all need those defences. We do have plans to develop them, but they're very, very expensive. You'll never be able to defend the whole country. No. You can only ever have point defence. So you can defend certain things, maybe a couple of cities, military bases. You've got to decide what you want to defend, and then you could defend them. And we do have programs, long-term programs, to develop that. But I mean, that's the next 10 to 20 years, not the next 2 to 5 years. What we've got at the moment is what the Navy's got. So we've got the Sea Viper or Sea Scepter missile system, which fires Aster missiles, which are pretty good. And they can bring down a ballistic missile, but they're really for defence in a battle area, like in the Gulf or whatever. And we deploy them only on our Type 45 destroyers. Yep. Of which we famously we have 6.
I'm not going to let you talk down to Type 45 again, Michael. No.
Here we go. 2 of them, as far as I know, 2 of them are at sea at the moment on operations. Only 2 out of 6. And if they can defend against ballistic missiles, but I mean that's just for local area defence. So the bottom line is we've got nothing meaningful at the moment. And it's going to take some time before we do.
That word in Adz's question, comprehensive. I mean, comprehensive in terms of ballistic missile defence. Iron Dome in Israel, but it's a much smaller country. And even then, it can't
be. The Iron Dome is not total. No. And this is Israel's Iron Dome. And Britain is, the last time I looked, it was something like 25 or 30 times bigger than Israel. I'm
not going to bother Googling it, but yes, definitely.
Yeah, in terms of territory. So you can't have complete air defence, Star Wars type defence that Ronald Reagan used to talk about in 1983.
Well, Trump's got his Golden Dome coming.
That's right, Golden Dome. It has all the same problems. And ultimately, when you talk about aerial warfare, offence is always easier than defence.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not always more successful, but it's cheaper and easier to keep up the offensive because you've got a third dimension to operate in. Not just space, but not just sort of length and width, but you've got upwards as well. You've got aerospace to operate in, and because of that it is always relatively cheaper to be offensive than defensive.
But of course, leaving yourself very vulnerable with that. How serious is the threat to the homeland from ballistic missiles? I mean, probably just address that now. I mean, is it something that military planners do think about?
They do, yeah. Right. They never did 10 years ago. I mean, I remember sitting in meetings where they said, Cyprus is what we were talking about, Akrotiri and Dikalia and the bases. And they said, we never used to worry about the idea of an attack on our bases. But it's already happened. I mean, a drone attack on Akrotiri at the beginning of this Iran war in March. And the idea of an attack on British forces abroad, ballistic missile attack, on British bases abroad is absolutely logical. And you have to say the possibility of a ballistic missile attack into the United Kingdom, but the first set would be as bases. There are, because we've concentrated, for the sake of economy, we've concentrated a lot of things in certain bases, and I could name them, but I won't. But I mean, there's at least half a dozen targets around Britain that the Russians will well know about, which are key bases. And the point is, if we get ourselves into a crisis with the Russians, the first thing we've got to do is distribute things out of those bases.
Are those bases defended by some kind of
No, they don't. We don't have anything.
You don't have it.
No,
there's no. So we don't have Patriot batteries here.
No, we don't run Patriot. No, we don't. Netherlands does. Germany does. We don't.
Why didn't we ever buy that?
We didn't think we ever needed it, and we shouldn't buy it now. No. And don't touch Patriot now, because A, you won't get them for years, B, they're extremely expensive, and C, there'll be a cheaper alternative coming along if we work with Ukraine.
But that's interesting, isn't it? The Netherlands thought about it and decided to purchase it, but Britain, exceptional.
We didn't. Yeah, we did. They just took a different decision, I think. And they've got their Patriot batteries, or have had. I mean, the Netherlands have given at least one of those to Ukraine, maybe 2. So, yeah, we've got key bases, and it is plausible, and it wouldn't have been plausible 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that those bases in the UK, key bases, might be targets for ballistic missile attack, which is not an attack against the general population, but it would still be an attack on British soil.
I certainly would. Question from Alexander 55. Russia has built more launch sites for their long-range Duran drones. Is it plausible these could be intended to threaten NATO directly, and how would the alliance respond?
Yeah, I think what he's talking about is Duran 4. This is the new Russian drone. It's based on the Shahed 136, as these drones, these slow drones that they got from Iran in big numbers. And the Russians have improved them. They've given them a jet engine. They've made them bigger, faster. What the Russians are trying to do is the Duran 4 reputedly can run faster than the little Ukrainian smart anti-drone
that goes after it,
which goes after it. Yeah, and these little smart drones, they are just drones, but they rise really quickly, and they're fast enough to collide with a big drone. Well, the Duran 4 is quick enough to get around them. So yes, the bases are being put there because of the Ukraine war, but could they reach Western Europe? Yes, of course they could. So they have a dual purpose in that respect, but that's not why they're there. They're there for the Ukraine war. The reason that the Russians are putting these bases on the ground is because the old Shahed 136, the original drones they got from Iran, could be launched from the back of a truck, 5 at a time. You used to see them. They literally would rise up on just racks, and all 5 of them would sort of shoot off more or less together. These Duran 4s, they can't be launched like that. They're bigger, they're heavier. They have to be launched with a pneumatic catapult. And that means they need a rail and this catapult machinery. So the whole thing is more involved in launching them. So they basically catapult it off, and then the jet engine fires. The same as the Nyan drone, the British drone, which has gone to Ukraine. It's launched by a catapult, and then the engine fires. So the engine doesn't have to use up all that fuel just to get away at the beginning. That inertial power you need just to get started is taken care of by the catapult. But that means the Duran 4s can't be used in the same numbers as the Shahed 136s, the original low-tech things. These things, because they're getting bigger and more sophisticated, are more involved in the launching process.
That launch method, sorry, this is just a sidebar for me for my own satisfaction. That launch process with the catapult, is that how those V1s were launched? Way back when?
Back in the Second World War, off a long ramp.
Yeah.
But in these cases, in their case, the ramp was quite long because the jet engine wasn't powerful enough to give it a real push.
Right, so it had to really be...
It really had to, and the V1s used a lot of fuel just getting off the ground.
Right.
That's the same principle for catapulting aircraft off the end of a carrier. You know, you don't want to use up all the fuel just trying to generate enough speed down the flight deck to get the aircraft off.
Get it off. And just a quick thought as well on the number of Duran that Russia's producing. Apparently, they're producing about 3,000 of those Duran 4s every month, and Duran 5 models, which I'm not even
I haven't seen a Duran 5 yet.
But
the Duran 4, the production numbers are relatively high, but they will not be able to launch them in the same numbers as they launched the previous drones, the Shahed 136s.
A couple of questions from the live chat. Thank you, guys. We'll start with this one from Tom Luchford 3172. Sorry if I said your surname wrong, Tom. Sorry about that. Now, Tom, well, it's Luetch Ford.
Oh, right,
Luchford.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
Yeah?
All right, Tom.
Tom. If Ukraine were to ramp up production of FP5s, that's the Flamingo, right, to say 50 to 100 missiles per month, would that make a big impact on the war and potentially force a ceasefire earlier? So this is their long-range...
the FP5, the Flamingo.
Flamingo.
Yeah. Well, they are trying to ramp up production. They are getting some help from with components and engine parts and so on from the Europeans. The Flamingo does make a difference. It won't. Again, no single system will win them the war. And the Russians have found that they've been able to bring down a fair few of the Flamingos because, as I've said before, it's got the radar signature of an elephant. It's not difficult to spot. But the Ukrainians have been able to develop Flamingos now with a guidance system that operates 100 feet off the ground and can go around a few things. So it can get lost in the clutter, which gives it some ability to avoid radar. If I had to guess, from what I've been checking recently, last month, I think maybe half of the Flamingos have been getting through.
Right.
But not all of them. But half have been getting through. But it carries a heavy warhead. It's got long range. It is doing some real damage, certainly to the Wild Breeds warehouses and some of the other targets that have been flung at. If the Ukrainians could really ramp up production, it would certainly help because it's their best system at the moment. But they've got more systems coming on board, and their FP7, which is their ballistic missile, which I think will be the basis of an anti-ballistic missile system,
right.
But also an FP9, which might be more than a year away. But those, I think, will be very capable in terms of being able to hit Russian targets. If by then they still have to feel that they're doing that.
And if the Russians are bringing down half of those that are launched, what are they using? Is it the S-300, S-400?
Yeah, the S-300s are bringing them down again, because the S-300 is perfectly good if it's got a decent radar hit. I mean, it works. And the 400, the S-400 works very well.
Is that their equivalent to what a Patriot battery?
Yes, yeah, more or less. It's not as good as Patriot, but the S-400 is certainly very capable of bringing down a range of targets at once. And so if the Ukrainians are trying to overwhelm a target with lots of drones and then some flamingos mixed in with them, the S-400 should be able to distinguish between them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Another question here from the chat. Thank you. Royalty14. When we talk about Russia's hybrid war against the UK, are these Russian government departments hacking our public infrastructure and systems, or are they cells of freelance hackers who are state-sponsored, so Putin has deniability?
Yeah, it's a very good point. They've inspired a lot of people. I mean, they do some of it themselves and then, of course, deny it. But also they have found it relatively easy, to inspire others to do it. And they're inspiring, a lot of young men, all men at the moment, as far as I know, of teenagers, late teenagers, to have a go at lighting fires, arsonist behaviour for £1,000 or something like that.
Recruited on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they're recruiting people to just have a go, and people who've got no particular view one way or another and are prepared to just do it are fairly easy to find. So there's a big push on at the moment that the Russians are trying to inspire people to frustrate the West in any way they think they can.
Interesting. Question here from Jonathan about Ukraine's potential counteroffensive. Jonathan says, is Ukraine now getting the upper hand in this war? He said he's read about the settlement of Alexandrivka and the counteroffensive around there, liberating some 26 settlements, 745 square kilometres. He says, is it true? And how are they doing it?
Jonathan, you've been reading David Axe. David Axe has had some good stuff on this. I think that's where it probably come from. Yeah. So yes, the Ukrainians launched an offensive on the 29th of January, which they sort of declared finished about a week ago on the 12th of February. 12th of August. And they kept quiet about this offensive. They didn't allow, it was a lot of operational security.
Yep.
They didn't allow videos of it, which they normally would, to circulate. And this offensive went across Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, and into Donetsk. And they claim about 750 square kilometers. Opinion on that varies, but it's about that. It's something like that. They've taken a lot of areas. 26 settlements, not sure about that, but that's one of the things that's being said. What's interesting, two things are interesting about this offensive. One is that they've used some of their traditional old armoured units. They've come out in ways that have not been seen elsewhere on the battlefield. So they've got the air assault brigades, the 78th, the 79th, the 80th, the 82nd, where a lot of British stuff went into the 82nd, the 95th, and then the 1st Assault Regiment and the 425 Assault Regiment. So they used thousands of troops with their tanks and their armoured vehicles.
It's manoeuvre warfare.
And they did some good because they were able to create gaps in the drone coverage that the Russians had. Now, that offensive has kind of run out of steam now, as they always will, because the Russians were falling back on their own lines. It's always easier when you're falling back on your own lines to stiffen your resistance, as opposed to when you're going forward and you're stretching your own lines of communication and so on. So so there has been an offensive, and it has worked, and it's done the Ukrainians a lot of good, and they can now start to talk about it. Now, they say that they occasioned in that period, 6 months, 16,000 Russian casualties, which sounds a lot, but actually it isn't over 16 months if you look at the number of casualties that have been taken elsewhere. And this is my interpretation of that, is that what they've done, they've not defeated the Russian forces, they've pushed them out.
Right.
There's a big difference in military terms to defeating an enemy, where a general's defeat, a real general's victory, is you get around the flanks, get around the back of them, and a whole unit, a whole corps, an army has to surrender or go or fight its way out or take a lot of casualties or whatever. And you destroy the army, you destroy their cohesion as a unit. That's destruction. That's what generals would really always want to do. But sometimes they can't do that. All they can do is push them out. So the enemy gives up territory but retires in good order.
Retreats in good order, yeah.
With 16,000 casualties over 6 months, I think the Russians have retired in pretty good order. They haven't been defeated in these areas, but the Ukrainians have taken it back.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good examples of armies that have had victories that weren't really. There were victories. They took territory, but they didn't destroy the enemy. You've got to destroy the enemy in front of you to actually ultimately win the war. So great examples of that in the Second World War, First World War. Lots of them.
Go on then, give us one.
Oh, all right. I mean, one of my favourite ones. Okay, the invasion of Sicily. Montgomery was bogged down to begin with in the invasion of Sicily, and General Patton, George Patton, instead of supporting Montgomery, which he should have done, went for Palermo because he wanted to liberate Palermo, and Palermo was the first city in Europe to be liberated, and they ran into it.
Dramatized in the movie Patton, which I watched recently.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. And so and that let the Germans escape.
Yep,
so instead of surrounding them and making them surrender on Sicily, they escaped because Patton sort of went the other way because he couldn't resist the idea of liberating.
Wanted to march in there to liberate the city.
And the huge thing happened in Rome, the liberation of Rome. Mark Clarke, I mean, Harold Alexander set it up for him to completely surround the German 10th and 14th armies, to smash them as units, not to kill them all, but to smash them as units so they couldn't function any longer. And instead of surrounding them, he couldn't resist it. He went for Rome, to liberate Rome, so that Sherman tanks could, go through the streets of Rome, girls jumping on the tanks, kissing the soldiers. Who could resist it? And with that, the German 10th and 14th armies withdrew in good order and were there to fight another day. And they slogged their way all the way up Italy because basically the Americans kept liberating cities when the British commanders wanted them to surround forces.
Well, you surround the forces, then you can capture those troops, or as you say, fight their way out, and then you've taken that army off the battlefield.
That's right. You remove them.
Certainly the German troops were then redeployed back into
That's right.
Western
That's
Europe.
What they did, and they moved up. And the victory in Italy, remember, that went from 43 to 45. The final victory in Italy to Harold Alexander, a great general actually, much underappreciated, didn't come until the day before the surrender in Europe, May the 8th. So I think it was May the 6th, 1945. It took 2 years of grinding attrition all the way up Italy while the Germans withdrew in good order, because they couldn't persuade the Americans to stop going for cities and surround the enemy. And Alexander failed in that respect. He had a big command, and he was trying to deal with American commanders who were quite difficult, like Patton and Mark Clarke and so on.
But Churchill talked Roosevelt into it. The soft underbelly. This was the whole idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The Americans were never really convinced by the Italian campaign. And neither was Montgomery, funnily enough, although he was involved in it for a while till he was taken away to do the Normandy invasion. But the point, coming back to Ukraine, what I gather from this operation that started at the end of January is that they didn't destroy any significant Russian forces. They took ground. They made them withdraw.
Right.
So good for them.
Yeah.
But all of those sort of offensives run out of steam eventually, because the other side, by withdrawing, they withdraw towards their strengths, and you, by going forward, are taking more risks the further forward you go.
Yeah. Move on to some more questions now then, Michael. Question here from someone called Peace. Is Ukraine's recent successes on the ground strengthening its position not to accept a freeze of the current lines in any settlement? Could Ukraine turn this momentum into an offensive that regains most of its territory?
Not across the whole front. I think what we've seen in Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia and this part of Donetsk down in the southwest has been impressive. They might be able to do that again once or twice more. But I don't think that, as I've just said, the Russian lines are not going to crack. I don't think they're going to get in behind them in any significant way. And so I think that the Ukrainians have got to keep on pressing to get as much territory back as they can and to avoid losing the fortress cities that they still haven't lost. They've still got them, and I think they'll keep them for the rest of the year. But ultimately, this war will be determined by other strategic issues, like homeland bombardment on both sides with drones, like what happens in Washington, what happens in Europe, the view that the Chinese take, what North Korea does. The whole series of bigger games that are at play will determine how the war goes rather than what actually happens on the battlefield, which is not to say that what happens on the battlefield isn't terribly important. It is, because the Ukrainians have got to avoid losing on the battlefield. They've got to hold off Russian attacks,
Yep.
so that the message gets through to Moscow that in addition to the Russian economy having real trouble, in addition to the disquiet among the Russian population, in addition to international pressure, which might be greater on Russia in a year's time or 6 months' time, in addition to all that, and you're not even succeeding on the ground, it's important that the Russian people and analysts know that they're not succeeding on the ground.
Yep.
Because Putin's argument has always been, we will win. Eventually, we have to win because we are Russia. And after 4 years, into a fifth year, well, Mr. Putin, it's not happening. That's an important perspective which has got to be kept alive. So, for people fighting and suffering and dying on the battlefield, it is not pointless. But the fact is that the locus of the political decisions will lie elsewhere, while you hold the ground, as it were. You hold your position as best you can on the ground.
Well, with that in mind, a question here from Tom, who is serving in the International Legion in Ukraine. So thank you very much for this question, Tom.
Yeah.
And
well done, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, all the very best to you and all those around you. He says many soldiers are exhausted. What do you think it will take for peace to become possible?
A ceasefire is not implausible. Maybe within 6 or 8 months from now, depending on how things go. And a ceasefire is the best we can hope for. I mean, peace, I think, is a long, long way away, but a ceasefire that would allow everyone to recalibrate their options would be, would be very welcome to everybody. The Russians may be closer to that than people think, or to a partial ceasefire, a ceasefire against air attack.
For them to allow them to reset.
Of course, yeah. And Ukraine would do the same.
Yeah.
Any sort of relaxation of the fighting will help both sides to rethink what they want to do and to restock. That's inevitable. So it isn't. I think that this war will grind on for 10 more years like this. The antagonism will grind on a long, long time. But this phase, this hot war phase, may be closer to some sort of pause than we now think, because I think things that are happening homeland to homeland,
I was going to say,
politically,
because of the long-range attacks that might be
the crisis is getting more serious, and because as it gets more serious, it may come to a point where the world really gangs up on the Russians to stop, at least so the crisis doesn't get more dangerous to Europe and to other parts of the world.
It's certainly ratcheting, isn't it, Michael? Pete's asking, Russians, he says, are making large cash withdrawals and military and economic pressure appears to be growing. Are we getting any closer to serious domestic opposition to the Putin regime? We talked about those elections, and he's banned any party that's against the war. So,
but it's a good point. I mean, the cash withdrawals, I've been reading about this last couple of weeks. The cash withdrawals across Russian banks are quite significant, and that people don't believe in the banking system in Russia. They're losing faith in it, which is a big thing. And this is where the Wildberries offensive comes in. Wildberries are the most indebted company in Russia. Most of their debt is owned by VTB Bank, and VTB is a state-sponsored bank. And VTB might go under. If Wildberries goes bankrupt, VTB might go under, and that might cause a banking collapse because the public are waiting for something like that to happen. They're anticipating it. So everybody is stuffing their mattresses with cash at the moment, which is what happens when a banking system is under strain. Everybody tries to get the money out at once. The other thing they're frightened of is that the Russian government might raid their deposits to pay for the war.
Right.
They might suddenly make they say, take a haircut. They might make everybody take a haircut and lose 10% of their or 15% of their deposits. The government might borrow them, without options. Exactly, to pay for the war. And there's a fear, I don't know how realistic it is, but it is a fear amongst a lot of citizens with middle-class Russians that their bank accounts might get raided.
That's interesting.
By some sort of overwhelming government action, which won't happen until after the Russian elections. Wouldn't happen likely, but after the elections we might see partial mobilization, million men being partially mobilized. We might see some attempt to grab people's deposits in Russia. We might see that, and we might see even tighter restrictions on personal movement and
even
travel, even tighter on Russia, just ability to move around and do things. But nothing until the elections.
No, why would they need to wait for that? Just to sort of, so they feel like they have the rhetorical sort of support to be able to.
I think this is just nervousness. That if they did any of those things now, it might actually make the elections really hard to handle. And as I say, that we don't doubt what the result will be, and united Russia will emerge with a huge majority. But the underlying disquiet might come out in all sorts of ways. So, I mean, otherwise, the Russians wouldn't be locking so many people up now if they didn't fear some sort of public reaction.
Let's move on to the news of the day. Final couple of questions now, and the news of the day about Mikhailo Fedorov, the former defence minister, young man who was sacked. There have been protests on the streets asking for him to be reinstated. That hasn't happened. But today he has come out and called for there to be elections. Of course, the law in Ukraine is that during wartime, under martial law, elections cannot be held. Zelenskyy said that all the way through, but Fedorov is demanding that there are some. So Bet5 asks, is there any realistic danger to Zelensky's position right now?
There is, actually. I mean, not today, but I mean, Zelensky is facing his hardest day, I think, since the day of the invasion in 2022, because a whole series of things have happened. One is Parliament is meant to be ratifying his choice for replacement defence minister, Kamali. There are demonstrations outside Parliament to prevent that. There are rumours that in the Ministry of Defence in Kiev, a series of officials will walk out if Kamali walks in order to make it impossible for him to manage the place without big changes. Rumours that is the case.
And who are these people, Fedorov supporters? Who?
So it seems, So it seems that inside the MOD and outside the MOD, Fedorov's got a lot of supporters. So all those things have happened. Also today, NABU and SAPO, who are the two anti-corruption units, have started raids. They've raided the vice presidential or the vice chief of the presidential staff's office.
Wow, getting close.
They've raided the board offices of a state-controlled bank and others, they say, on money laundering investigations. So today a series of raids have taken place with demonstrations outside Parliament. Question whether the new defence minister, Kamali, will be ratified inside Parliament. And all of that is going on. And then on top of all of that, Fedorov has made this astonishing 9-minute video for YouTube in which he's challenged Zelenskyy. He said, we've got to have elections. Well, everybody knows you can't have elections for all sorts of very, very practical reasons, which I could go into. But he knows, I mean, Fedorov must know that. But what he's saying is he's challenging Zelenskyy's legitimacy as the leader. And I don't know what Fedorov does next, to be honest, because this is as dangerous as it gets politically.
It's a big card to play, and we are now, at a sort of a fork in the roads, really. What may well happen. And the politics of this now, Michael, is what is fascinating. This is a country at war.
I mean, if Zelenskyy ignores it, then he runs the risk of real popular discontent against him when he's not that unpopular in the country. I mean, he's not as popular as he was.
No, but there's a poll that Fedorov would beat him handily if there were,
He probably would. He probably would. I mean, the rivals are Zelenskyy, who's the ambassador, General Zelenskyy, who's here as ambassador. Budanov, who is his chief of staff, who he needs, but he doesn't really get on with. So Zelenskyy and Budanov. And then Fedorov. I mean, those are the three probable rivals. People like Poroshenko is probably not now a credible rival. Tymoshenko, Yulia Tymoshenko, she's not a credible rival. Those are the old guard. Their time is probably gone. But these people, Budanov, Fedorov, and Zelenskyy, are serious contenders. And though Zelenskyy, if say those four ran in some way, Zelenskyy would probably emerge with more votes than the other three, but not a majority. He'd end up split. But there's not going to be an election anytime soon. There can't be. But somehow he's got to get himself out of this crisis.
I'm not a political strategist, but I just had an idea. During wartime, countries often have coalition governments where they bring people in and you have the best people possible running the country. Zelensky's under pressure from all these different departments. Why wouldn't he bring them closer to him and then run it?
He might try. He might say, OK, look, I'll back off and Fedorov will be defence minister again. That's what Fedorov says. I will only be defence minister or the chief of the army, but I shouldn't be chief of the army because I'm not a military person. I can't, I shouldn't do that job. So there's only one job he wants, unless he wants to be president as well. And he probably does. But in a way, if Zelenskyy does that, and that would be one way out, to say, OK, look, I get it, I back off, I see public emotion on this, then his political capital would be very low afterwards. He'd be gravely weakened politically. But that might turn out to be his only way out. I don't. I honestly, Kamali, I cannot see where this crisis is going to go. Yesterday, I could see this thing building up. I woke up this morning and heard the news about Fedorov's overnight thing. I thought, good grief, that really changes it. This rolls up today's crisis into the biggest political crisis in Ukraine since the February the 24th, 2022.
Final question then. Matthew asks, will Zelenskyy call an election? You said that you don't think it's likely. And if he did, how vulnerable would it be to Russian interference? I mean, imagine
Hugely,
massively, right?
Hugely,
That's part of the problem.
There's two ways
no
you could do it. If you were to try to have an election with everybody in the wrong place and 20% of the territory not available and 4 million people stuck in occupied territory, 4 million people IDPs, 1 million in the armed forces, 5 or 6 million people outside Ukraine, it'd be a nightmare. Yeah. So you could try and say, well, we'll try an election as best we can and run it on the streets, as it were, and then everyone's very, very vulnerable. And people queuing at polling stations will be very, very vulnerable. Or we do it online. We'd have a digital election. And that's what the Russians are really good at. They would get inside that like there's no tomorrow. And they play around with it. And so make sure that pro-Putin people were fixed to be elected. An election in Ukraine would give the Russians exactly what they would want, which is the ability to play games in it. And at the very least to wreck it. If they couldn't manipulate it to get the result they wanted, they'd find ways of wrecking it. That's the problem. Even the practicalities of the election are daunting. But then when you put Russian interference into it as well, because they interfere in every election that they want to, in Europe, in Western Europe, in the United States, they've even admitted that they do it. There's no question about it. They would do that. The only plausible way in which the Ukrainians can have an election, which is what Zelenskyy has always said, is if there's a ceasefire. Yeah, and he said to the Americans, if you can create a ceasefire and you enforce it, we'll have elections. And he said, I heard him say it at Munich when I was there earlier. He said, we will have elections in a couple of months. Yeah. If you can give us a ceasefire, I will give you elections. He said then, he'd originally said 3 months, and on the platform he said 2 months. I'll give you elections in 2 months. Wow. And everyone smiled.
Bargain, and exactly. Yeah. Is he going to start facing... We already know that the Americans want him to have the elections, and for reasons that they can explain themselves. Will he start facing any pressure from some of his allies, from the UK, from France, Poland, to have elections? Or will they just say, look, that's your constitution, we know what you're doing, you can make it?
I don't think the European allies are not pressing him to have an election, because I think they understand the issues in the way that certainly the White House doesn't seem to. So I don't think there's any pressure there. But there is pressure from all of the European allies for him to be more vigorous in dealing with corruption. Right. Because if you want to get into the EU, you've got to do more about corruption. And it's not good. It's not a good look anyway. Now, as I've said before, I think the Ukrainians are dealing with corruption reasonably well. There are two organizations, NABU and SAPO. I mean, Zelenskyy tried to restrict them a year ago.
That was the
People
last
came
crisis,
out in the streets,
Yeah, absolutely.
and they are more vigorous than ever.
Yeah.
And they've got good directors, and they are trusted by the international community. So Ukraine is doing more about corruption, as I say, than the United States is doing about its corruption. It has a better story to tell than a lot of people think. Yeah. But they've got to do more. Yeah. And the appearance that Zelenskyy is complacent in the face of corruption around him, not him, but people around him are corrupt. But having said all that, I mean, you think about Mindish, the man who disappeared a year ago, and he's accused of embezzlement of $100 million, right? Now, that's peanuts. That's the price of one F-35. Yeah. But it's corruption. And it was defence money. That's what makes people so angry. It was defence money. But I mean, the amounts being talked about. I mean, the money laundering allegations today. The last figure I saw about 2 hours ago was $35,000. Well, I mean, in corruption terms, that's peanuts, absolute peanuts. But I mean, corruption is corruption.
Yeah, absolutely, and exactly, and it completely undermines. And they want to have trust in the institution that is fighting this war to try and fend off the Russians for them. We've gone for an hour, Michael, so I think we'll call it quits, because you've probably got commitments to do other things, and I'm sure you guys want to get on with your afternoons as well. So thank you very much for being with us. Do appreciate it. As always, thank you for your questions. And I am pretty sure, I'm going to say this now quickly, yes, schedules do align for next week. If you're around, I'll be here. So we'll see you guys soon as well. Thanks for being with us.